Can you hear me or no? All attendees, it doesn't include a panelist, right? We can still talk.
Joe, we are starting the broadcast, so if anybody can mute their mic as a panelist, that'd be great. Only unmute your mic when it's your turn to speak. Thanks.
Okay, so we go live at 8:30, right?
At 8:30, so right now, people, you can see Mohan in the attendees pane.
Yep.
You can see staff, that's us. Attendees basically now are people that did register for the webinar.
Perfect. Okay. So I think we'll give people 7 more minutes to filter in, and then we'll begin at 8:30 then.
Yes, we will start on time. Mohan, it's Yannick here. I know you poured yourself a cup of coffee. Make sure it doesn't get cold, right?
It's okay. It's
there you
boiling.
Go.
So it's
there you
just
go.
it's cooling down now.
Good.
It's great. We're starting to see more and more people come in. I think we have about 17 attendees already, and more people are filtering in.
Yes. So I think with any webinar, you'll see people that start coming maybe in a little bit later. So I'll leave it up to you if you really want to start at 8:30 or if you want to still give people maybe 2 or 3 minutes after 8:30, I'll leave that up to you.
Sure, we'll do. Maybe what we'll do is we'll start at 8, but we'll give people a couple of minutes just to start filtering in.
You can just keep us entertained in the meantime, Mohan. You can tell some jokes or sing us a little song or something, just to make sure everybody's, you know, some background elevator humming or something.
That's right. Well, we never know about any hidden talents that we might have, right? Any hidden talents, Mohan?
I'm sorry, Yannicka?
Any hidden talents that you want to share with us?
You know, I could try singing, but I don't want to scare away the people who've already logged in. So we'll
Okay.
save that for after tomorrow.
For a different name. That's right. That's right. When it's all done. For the ITS Canada virtual conference coming up in November, so we did one in June and we have part 2. We are actually going to live stream the ITS Canada rock band. So we've got a couple of ITS Canada board directors who will be doing a half-hour, 30-minute live stream show featuring 6 songs that are yet to be determined, but like The Clash. So anyway, that's what the plan is. We're going to go into a recording studio. We're going to have like a sound technician to make sure it works well. Anyway, so the ITS Canada rock band, and we're going to call it ITS because it stands for Intelligent Tuxedo Sociables. That's what we are going to call the band. And next year at the ITS Canada 2022 conference in Windsor, we're going to have the ITS Canada Big Band perform live at the gala dinner. Anyway, so.
Well, after Mohan's performance here, you might have another band member by the sounds of it.
Well, there you go. So Mohan, May 5th, 2022, we welcome you with open arms to be part of the live performance at the St. Clair Centre for the Arts in Windsor, Ontario during the gala dinner. So anyway, mark your calendar.
Be sure to mark my calendar. I may not be able to join you guys live, but you can bet I'll be broadcasting it.
Well, maybe I can talk to Ryan and then see once. Maybe he'll let you go.
Yeah, Mohan, I think it's a part of your job duties now, so I'm not sure if you have really, you know, the opportunity to say no.
It is 8:30 right now, and we have quite a number of people in the audience, but we are seeing more people come in, so we'll give people another 1 or 2 minutes to start filtering in before we begin our webinar today. It's really nice to have everyone, and I think we have a good mix. I see some familiar names, some people from Malaysia, some from Canada, and I think from other parts of the world as well. So thank you all for joining us wherever in the world you may be, and we'll start in 30 seconds. All right. Salam sejahtera and good morning to all of you joining us from Malaysia, and bonjour and hello to those who are joining us from Canada and everywhere else in the world. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to this 2-day webinar event titled ITS, Build Back Better. This event is jointly organized by the Intelligent Transport Society of Canada and the Intelligent Transport Society of Malaysia in collaboration with the High Commission of Canada in Malaysia. My name is Mohan Gurusamy, and I have the pleasure of being your host this morning. This dialogue on intelligent transport systems, or ITS, represents an ongoing partnership between ITS Canada and ITS Malaysia to elevate the discussion around smart mobility. In 2017, a large Malaysian delegation led by the Malaysian Minister of Public Works attended the ITS World Congress held that year in Montreal, followed by a technical visit to Toronto's Highway 407. In 2019, ITS Canada and ITS Malaysia delegates met again, this time at the World Congress in Singapore. With the aim of keeping this dialogue going despite the pandemic, and with the goal of bringing in you, a larger audience, to the conversation, it was decided that this year, this joint webinar will be held featuring ITS experts from both Canada and Malaysia. We hope that this event will facilitate an exchange of ideas and knowledge on how the pandemic has affected transportation and driven emerging technologies in ITS development. Before we proceed into this webinar, I would like to go over some housekeeping rules. We ask that all attendees kindly turn off your video and mute your microphones to minimize distractions. If you have questions for our speakers today, please type them into the question box, which you will see on the right-hand side of your screen. We will do our best to address as many of your questions as time permits during the Q&A session. And we remind you again, it's the question box, not the chat box. So we'll be monitoring the question box for your questions, where you can direct your questions to individual speakers. To start off today's webinar, it gives me great pleasure to invite the Senior Trade Commissioner of Canada in Malaysia, Mr. Ryan Berg, to deliver a few welcoming remarks. Ryan, over to you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Mohan. Good morning. Selamat pagi. Bonjour tout le monde. Bienvenue, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us today. I hope everybody can hear me okay. So I know you didn't come to listen to me, so I will be short and sweet and let everybody get to the important business of the program today and tomorrow. Just briefly though, I'm recently arrived in Malaysia. I just cleared my quarantine about a week ago with my family, so really excited to be here in Malaysia, and you know, even more excited to see all of the great collaboration that's going on between our two business sectors, including in this sector, which Mohan has told me quite a bit about. It's obvious to everybody that we're living in challenging times right now. We see that everywhere. I see that as I try to arrive in the middle of this pandemic and quarantine and establish, get settled here in Kuala Lumpur. But challenge, like anything, challenge always does bring opportunity as well. And I think it's given us a chance to stop for a moment, rethink some of the things we do across the board. And I would say nowhere more so than this sector, which has been facing enormous challenges in the past year and a half or more. So as cities in Canada and Malaysia reestablish their way of life in this in a post-COVID world, I'm excited about the conversations that are going to be taking place today and tomorrow, and the ongoing relationships that we're building here. So Mohan mentioned the title of this event was Build Back Better. And the idea is to discuss that we'll be able to discuss the economic, social, and psychological recovery of transport systems post-pandemic. So we'll explore how commuters can be accommodated back onto public transport systems in a way that makes them feel safe. And really, this is a two-way street where we will learn and build and hopefully grow partnerships as we move forward. I actually remember the first time that I arrived in Malaysia was 20 some years ago for a visit, and I remember jumping on the light rail and being quite impressed. I'm from a small city in Canada, and I saw the infrastructure, even 20 plus years ago that was built here, and was impressed. So there's a lot that we can share with each other in this area. But the challenges today, again, as I said, are new. People are for the moment avoiding air transport, obviously, or avoiding even crowded buses and trains. They're reducing cash transactions. They're being cautious overall, just being in public areas. And it gives us pause for thought, and it makes us think about how transport systems can be even more intelligent and can accommodate the needs of travelers as we navigate these new surroundings. As I mentioned, I just arrived in Malaysia, just a couple or 3 weeks ago, approximately. And I had an interesting challenge myself. About 3 days before jumping on a plane, my youngest son, 8 years old, broke his leg, broke his femur. And so that added to the challenge of moving across the world with the son in a full cast and in a wheelchair. So, you know, I really got to see, you know, some of the challenges for other people in society that we talk about, but sometimes not all of us, you know, get to or fortunately have to live. But so, you know, now wherever I go, I'm a bit more aware of access, you know, access for disabled travelers, and having, you know, traveled all the way around the world with this and tried to adapt, you know, the way we move around. Clearly, you know, intelligent transport is when we talk about it, it's also inclusive transport. So it's accessible, it's safe for all passengers, regardless of, you know, gender, age, disabilities, etc. The other thing that I think is really guiding a lot of the conversations now is climate across the board, and transportation systems obviously top of mind when we think about, you know, reducing carbon footprint. So we talk about climate-friendly transportation. The conversation used to be just about electric vehicles, and it's obviously gone way beyond that now. We've seen an increase in bicycle ridership. I see strewn about the city in KL and also in our cities back in Canada, electric scooters, you know, rideshare bicycles as cheap, what people will, you know, perhaps view now as safer ways to move about a city. So we'll see how that, I think, integrates into the overall mix of urban public transit in the, you know, months and years to come. You know, as we look for bicycle friendly, you know, pedestrian friendly, and really catering to the needs of urban dwellers in this respect as well. So although this pandemic has clearly gone on long enough, you know, I'm really inspired by you know, the promise of this post-COVID world. So we're looking at this journey together, how we move forward more effectively, and how we partner to and share ideas, share experience to achieve what we need to achieve in that regard. So as you know, Malaysia builds back better and Canada builds back better, I really hope that we have this opportunity to do so in collaboration. So I hope that over the next 2 days, through this webinar, you know, where you're inspired to think about some of these new ideas, to start some new partnerships, and just overall, I hope you enjoy the event. So big thank you to ITS Canada, to ITS Malaysia. I look forward to the conversations. Thank you very much, everybody. Merci beaucoup. Terima kasih.
Thank you very much, Ryan, for that opening keynote. And as Ryan rightly pointed out, it's undeniable that the way we commute from point A to point B has changed in a post-COVID world. As more people are going back to work and as social activities resume, there is a need to ensure that transport systems can keep people safe as we go about our daily activities. Which is why we are excited to have with us today 5 of Canada's and Malaysia's notable thought leaders in the field of intelligent transport systems. We will be hearing from each of them individually before we engage in a panel discussion with all of them together. Our first speaker today is the chair of the International Business Development Committee of ITS Canada. He has been active in the ITS field for over 40 years and was previously the chairman of ITS Canada between 1998 and 2009. His presentation for us today is titled Build Back Better with ITS, Emerging Technologies. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Joseph K. Lam. Over to you, Joe.
Thank you, Mohan, very much for your introduction. Can you hear me well? Mohan?
Perfect, we can hear you. Yes.
Okay,
go ahead,
so Yannicka, if I could have the slide, please.
Should be up. Can you see the slide then?
No, I don't see it for some reason.
Mohan, can you see it?
Oh, but it's a blue screen right now.
Oh, that's not good. Okay. Can you see it?
Okay. Yeah, it's too big. You gotta shrink it a little bit.
So Joe, it's in presentation mode.
Could you just perhaps leave a presentation mode, Yannicka?
It's in presentation mode.
Because what we're seeing is only a portion of the screen, I think the bottom half of the screen.
Okay, you don't see the full screen?
Well, I can use this. Look, Is
Perhaps
it
we
too
can.
big or too small? I'd rather have the small one.
Okay.
I'd rather have the small one.
Like this?
Hello?
No, we don't see your screen at all yet.
Okay, can you see it now?
I think it's
Yes.
good enough. I think, well, I can. No, I cannot. Okay. Anyway, I think that should be good enough. Well, as I said, Mohan, thank you for your introduction. I am very pleased to be here tonight and to renew our friendship with our Malaysian friends. So, selamat pagi to all my Malaysian friends, and good evening for our Canadian friends. My title today is Build Back Better Through ITS with Emerging Technologies. Basically, the pandemic that really hit transportation quite hard in many ways. And I'm going to go through that quickly and suggest ways and means of recovering from it. And next slide, please. Hello?
Yep, it's on the next slide.
Next, I'd like to bring you greetings from our Canadian colleagues from Toronto, Ottawa, and Montreal. So greetings to all of you. Next one. You know, as Mohan said, I've been in ITS for many, many years, and I kept asking myself this question. If man can fly to the moon, why can't we get to work on time? And I hope we get our answer soon. So next slide.
Yeah, it's on, Joe.
Well, first, a little bit of history. Some of you may recall that Toronto was the first city in the world to use a traffic computer to control traffic lights. We started experiment in 1959, which was followed up by a full-scale implementation in 1964. Next one. And many of you Malaysians know that in 1997, I implemented the Highway 401 electronic toll route, which is the world's first fully electronic tolling system. And I think a lot of Malaysian friends have already seen the installation. And also in 2017, Canada became the first country in the world to develop a artificial intelligence strategy, which we call Pan-Canadian AI strategy. Next one. But of course, we're now going through the pandemic and really impacts our transportation a lot. And in fact, it impacts everything that moves or tries to move. And I'm sure you all know the sad stories about airlines and their losses and so on. But in terms of urban traffic, I think it's totally disrupted our traditional work pattern because we really don't know who's working at home, who's working where, and who's working at all. And traffic has now become totally unpredictable. And the concept of rush hour we used before is gone. I mean, there's no such thing as the AM rush hour, PM rush hour. And I'm quite sure that traffic is now on the increase to a tremendous scale, simply because a lot of people are still staying away from transit. And to what level, we don't know yet, because we're not fully recovered yet. But in Toronto already, we saw quite an increase in traffic volume on our city streets. Another big impact is due to e-commerce. Because of the staying at home rule and everything, we all resort to online shopping in an accelerated scale. So in the last year, we saw a drastic increase in online shopping. At the same time, shoppers expect better service. They want instant delivery. They want accurate delivery. They want accurate invoicing and so on and so forth. And you know, experts agree that even after the pandemic, internet shopping is not going to drop significantly because we are kind of used to it. And it just adds another level to our urban problem. already we see a lot of delivery trucks moving around the neighborhood and without place to stop, to park. And so we have to deal with it really in a hurry. Of course, the transit story is even worse. And I've talked to many transit operators in the world. They claim that their ridership has been reduced by up to 60%, 60%. And this is very serious. And how many of them will come back? Because even when you come back, you need social distancing and so on and so forth, and you have to deal with a lower capacity situation. So again, we have to deal with it. And on that topic, I'd like to leave it to our transit experts later tonight. Next one, please. But thank goodness, we have a lot of disruptive technologies around that we can make use of. And I like to call them emerging technologies or enabling technologies, because they really enable us to enhance our ITS solution to a higher level to deal with the ever worsening situation. First of all, we have been talking about 5G networks for some time, and some 50 countries in the world have already implemented 5G. Why 5G? Well, because it's 10 times faster, it's 1,000 times the capacity, and the latency is at most 1/3 of that before. And that makes internet computing much easier and more affordable and so on. And of course, as you know, we all have the Internet of Things happening for a number of years now. And in fact, it was forecast that by 2025, we'll have 75 billion IoT devices in the world, which would provide a lot of data, of course. And then we know about connected autonomous vehicles, or CAV in short. I like to think of CAV in two terms. One is there are a bunch of new modes that we have to deal with. They may or may not reduce traffic congestion, but it does help the society to move forward. The second one is CAV in terms of IoT, because it's really a moving data node. And in fact, each CAV can issue up to 4 terabytes of data per hour. So there's a lot of things to contend with. And of course, if we can synchronize the CAV movement with our traffic signals, I think we can do a lot to reduce our traffic congestion. And that brings up the subject of big data. What does big data mean? Well, it means really a large variety of data coming in a big volume and in high velocity. So they call it the 3V. And that takes some new methodology to compute the data, to analyze it, and so on. And that brings us to data analytics. Now, data analytics is not quite the same as AI, because data analytics is more predictive and more mathematical and more deterministic, whereas AI is more judgmental. And in fact, in AI, we try to have the algorithm to imitate our brain, to make judgment and to make non-mathematical decisions, if you like. But in terms of data analytics, we are talking about having to analyze 2 exabytes per day of data. What is an exabyte? An exabyte is 1 billion gigs. That's how big it is. And I'm actually thankful that in my house I have a unlimited data plan, So 2 exabytes, I don't have to pay extra for it. But I probably need to buy a bigger computer to analyze all this data. So in AI, I've interviewed a lot of experts around the world, and AI seems to be the biggest things going on because so is that the signal that I'm out of time or no? Anyway, so AI is going to be a big thing. which I will come back later. Blockchain. Blockchain used to be used in cryptocurrency, and now used in supply chain a lot. Social networks help us to provide a lot of data, and of course, we all talk about smart city now, and of course, transportation will play a key role in smart city development. Next one, please. So we expect ITS to improve so that we can take care of the pandemic caused situation in terms of data collection, adaptive signal control, safety for vulnerable pedestrians in these applications, rely on data analytics or AI to analyze the situation much better than before so that we can time our signals more accurately. Instant detection, of course, through AI. And by the way, AI can also help you to detect if you have one person driving the car or 4 people sitting in the car. So that helps a lot of HOV, high occupancy lane, tolling operations. Because as you know, HOV, we always been struggling with having the right detection to be able to charge people that don't have a multiple occupancy. Of course, e-commerce and data for transit, which Brendan will talk about tonight. Next. Next. But it's really all about data, really. When you talk about all these technologies, when it comes down to the pipe, it's data. The future is all about the availability and manipulation of data. And I like to think that AI and data analytics are the key. And now I call it ADA. And ADA becomes a super connector that can unlock the power of the disruptive technology for ITS. Next. So I still look for a brighter future with the help of emerging technologies. But we need to always think about the 3 crystal balls I like to use. One is the crystal ball on needs. What are our future needs? The second crystal ball is about our technology trends. So the third one is more important. What are the societal or political response or legislative requirements? So in other words, we can talk about tolling or AI or whatever, but we have to choose things that our society accepts. So we always have to bear in mind of the third crystal ball, which is completes the picture. Next. I'd like to thank you for listening, and I'd like to sign off for a while. And if you've got any questions, please write it down and send it to Mohan, and I'll look after you at the end of this webinar. Thank you very much.
Awesome, Joe. Thank you very much for that very informative presentation. You know, that is one question that's going to be keeping me up at night. If we can get to the moon, why can't we get to work on time? Right. So thank you, Joe, once again for that presentation. And members of the audience, if you have questions for Joe, please do pop them into the questions tab. We'll be monitoring the questions tab for questions. You can select to address your questions specifically to Joe, and we will get to it during the Q&A session. Our next speaker is the Undersecretary of the Highway Planning Division at the Malaysian Ministry of Works. He has held various engineering, design, and project management roles in his 27 years with the Malaysian government. His presentation for us today is titled Malaysian ITS Blueprint, Deployment Post-Pandemic. Please join me in welcoming Insinyur Muhammad Fairoz bin Muhammad. Cik Fairoz, over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mohan. Thanks a lot. Okay. Good morning to all speakers. Can you hear me well? Hello. Can you hear me? All right. Line okay? My voice okay?
Yes, we can hear you clearly.
Thank you, Mohan. Thank you, Mr. Joe Lam. Very interesting, informative paper by Joe Lam. Okay, good morning to all speakers and ITS colleagues from Malaysia and Canada. Okay, as mentioned by Mohan just now, my name is Muhammad Fairoz, Under Secretary of Highway Planning Division, Ministry of Work of Malaysia. Today I will presenting Malaysia ITS Blueprint deployment post-pandemics. Okay, Janaki, please next. Janaki, next. Janaki, next slide, please.
The next slide is already there.
This stay at the first slide. Go to the next. Okay, thank you, Janaki. As we all know, 11 March 2020 last year, the World Health Organization (WHO) declared that COVID-19 as pandemic after 114 countries reported the cases worldwide. Since then, the pandemic has tremendously affected human mobility due to lockdown, travel restriction, social distancing, and suspension of all kinds of transportation services. Globally, the transportation sector has been one of the most heavily affected, including in Malaysia. While transportation plays an important role in the spread of COVID-19 disease, it is also the critical enabler for the socio-economic development of our country. Okay, next, Janaki. Next slide, Janaki. Next, Janaki. Okay, thank you, Janaki. A lot of positive and referring to this slide, a lot of positive and negative impact have been associated with the pandemic. For the purpose of today's presentation, I will only highlight 4 effects of COVID-19 pandemic toward transportation sector in Malaysia, and how the initiative in Malaysia ITS Blueprint could help the transportation sector to build better, to be back better for the future crisis. Okay, next. Okay, thank you. The first profound impact of COVID-19 pandemic to transportation sector is a steep decline in public transport ridership. In 2020, the Land Public Transport Agency, we call APAD, reported a 48.2% to 50% drop for daily average train and bus passenger, respectively, compared to 2019. This is due to the Movement Control Order (MCO) imposed by the government, as well as the restriction on higher when using the public transport. Indirectly, people shift to work using private vehicle or e-hailing to move from one location to another location. In the long run, if the situation persists, we'll see more vehicles on the road, which translate to more carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases emission, more road accident and congestion. So how ITS can help for this situation? Okay, next. Next, please, Janet. Janet, next slide, Janet. I think slide not so clear, blur. Okay, thank you. Okay, to elevate the road run, Janet, next. No, next. Yeah, this slide number, you go to the slide number 5, Janaki. Number 5. Slide number 5. Janaki, is it line okay? Janaki?
I can hear you. Yeah, I can hear you, except that I can't see what the slide number is. So what's the title of the next slide, please? This one or the next one?
The 6th slide.
Fifth slide, number 5. Page number 5.
The title is How Can ITS Help?
Okay.
That's the one.
I think line. Okay, this is first slide. You go to number 5 slide. All right. Thank you. I repeat again. To alleviate the long run impact and advanced traffic monitoring and management. Why is like move automatically? Okay. Monitoring and management system is needed to ensure the traffic can be controlled, managed, and therefore improve road user experience. This is Janaki. Okay, maintain to this slide, Janaki. This is line which one of the initiative currently being developed under the Malaysia ITS Blueprint, which is the National Intelligent Transportation Management Center, NITMC. NITMC is envisioned to be the center that will integrate, centralize, and disseminate traffic and other data information to the public and relevant agency for the purpose of traffic, transport, safety, disaster management. The output of NITMC, which is the journey planner and road congestion mapping, can help commuters to make better decisions on the travel mode of choice, be it by public transport or private vehicle. Other than that, Malaysian government is also looking into promoting the use of energy efficient vehicle, EEV, and automated, autonomous and connected vehicle, AACV, to minimize impact towards environment and improve road user safety. Next, Jackie. Next, okay. Okay, thank you. Okay. On this slide, the COVID pandemic also caused longer queue everywhere, including at public transport stations, thus increasing time travel needed by commuters when using public transport. This is due to the required social distancing as well as additional SOP implemented, such as we call contact tracing. In Malaysia, we call MySejahtera check-in, temperature check, and the sanitizing. The public transport operator have also reduced the service frequency for better control of the commuter. Due to this reason, commuter will experience longer waiting period at the station. As a result, modal shift is expected to occur when commuter resort to use private vehicle or e-hailing to travel. So how ITS can help the public transport operator to sustain in future crises? Next, Jackie. Next. All right, okay. There are two Malaysia ITS Blueprint initiatives that can help the transport industry to tackle this issue. First, mobility as a service, MaaS, or on-demand public transport. Ideally, MaaS integrates various forms of transport services into a single mobility service, accessible on demand through an application. MaaS in the future will be able to offer competitive capacity, time, and cost due to its flexibility that can be tailored to each unique user preference. Other than that, Malaysia is also developing an advanced traveler information system, ATIS, where a commuter can access various transportation and travel information from a single national window. User can retrieve information on traffic, public transportation, emergency, as well as public amenities that can improve their travel experience. In the end, travelers can plan their journey and travel safely with real-time traffic information all available at their fingertips. Both MaaS and ATIS will be able to help public transport operator to sustain in future crises due to the vast service information accessible by the public. Next, Janaki. Please, next slide, please. All right. Okay, during the pandemic, more emergency vehicles need to be deployed to attend COVID-19 cases and transport patients to and from quarantine centers. Apart from that, more security and safety personnel have to be assigned for areas that are under Enhanced Movement Control Order, EMCO, is to ensure the infection are contained within the affected locality and to prevent further community infection. As the number of cases spike, there are reported issues on insufficient logistic and healthcare personnel to attend other health cases, casualties, and disaster, as well as delay response time. So how to ensure that an efficient assignment of health logistic and personnel can be done in the future, and how ITS can improve the MERS 999 response time during crisis. Okay, next please. Next, Janaki. Slide number 9, Janaki. Okay, thank you. Apart from its role for Traffic and Transport Management Center, as mentioned earlier, NITMC is also envisioned to integrate data with the National Disaster Command Center, we call NDCC. This is to improve and better manage emergency logistic deployment during a crisis. NDCC, National Disaster Command Center, NDCC, will carry out decision-making process for disaster alert warning, and the information will then be shared with the NITMC, then eventually to the public. With the data from NITMC, the logistic dispatch process and emergency response period can also be improved, taking into consideration the availability of real-time traffic data information. NITMC can help NDCC to provide better MERS 999 response time during a crisis or emergency by identifying optimal route to be taken. Accurate communication of information and traffic condition can improve the response and transport time of the emergency medical services. Okay, next. Okay. Positively, look at this slide. Positively, COVID-19 has compelled at least 6 in 10 Malaysians, or 69%, to depend more heavily on the various forms of the contactless payment, according to UOB Asian Consumer Sentiment Study. Among the preferred payment options in Malaysia include quick response QR code payment and internet banking and mobile wallet. Bank Negara Malaysia also reported a 13.5% increase in a payment transaction volume per capita in Malaysia, with a population of 32.7 million. The rapid shift toward cashless society is caused by strict home quarantine order and the awareness of the public to avoid close contact via cash transaction. Consequently, the digital literacy and penetration increase, which also translate to the digital readiness of the society for transportation purposes. So, how Malaysia government should take the current trend of the cashless and e-payment to improve future transportation services. Next, Janaki.
Got 1 minute left in your presentation.
Moment, sikit lagi. Sorry. Just a few slides. One of the Malaysia ITS Blueprint initiative is the use of RFID tags for the toll payment. The RFID tag installed is connected to the user e-wallet for payment. The same RFID can also be used for the payment at petrol station, foreign vehicle road charge at border, as well as storing other information on the vehicle. Other than that, the government is looking at the digital readiness as an opportunity to enable mobility as a service or MaaS. These initiatives offer a centralized payment for the transportation services. In a single platform, user can look up book and pay for the planned trip using multimodal transportation. Hence, Malaysia government shall take the digital readiness of the society to lay the foundation for the frictionless and smarter transportation in the future. Please, next. I try to speed up. Next, Janaki. Okay, all in all, the Malaysia government indeed needs immediate intervention in order to build the transportation sector back better. All of other initiatives can be explored in addition to the existing action plan to enhance the resilience of the sector for future crises. Not only that, the transportation industry must also be ready to offer other potential ITS initiatives for the remain attractive and viable in the future. Both the government and private sector must work hand in hand to manage future crises, thus ensuring the survival of transportation sector and its infrastructure. Malaysia government always welcome potential cooperation on the capacity building and technology transfer for improving the transportation resilience. That's all my presentation this morning. Sorry for Malaysia morning. Thank you for your time. Sorry for maybe I take a little bit extra time from your side. Thank you everybody. Thank you, Mohan. I transfer to Mohan.
Thank you, Cik Fairuz. No worries. We apologize for some of the technical issues that we saw on our end. It's just a slight lag in the transition of the slides, but that was a very good presentation, Cik Fairuz. You were very helpful in walking us through what were the effects of the pandemic and specifically how ITS can help address those issues. So we look forward to hearing more from Cik Fairuz during the Q&A session. So members of the audience, if you have follow-up questions for Fairuz, please key them into the question box and we will during the Q&A session. Thank you, Cik Fairuz.
Yes. Thank you all.
Our next presentation is a very interesting one. Titled Using ITS to Support Transit Planning and Operations. We have not one but two speakers. Amir Shalabi from the University of Toronto and Brendan Hemley from Hemley and Associates. Together they will be discussing the latest developments to come out of the University of Toronto Transit Analytics Lab, as well as using transit data for ITS planning and management. Please join me in welcoming Amir and Brendan. Gentlemen, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mohan. Janneke, I think the presentation mode is has some issue. I see again very big font.
Presentation mode of your presentation.
Yeah, if you can show it again, please, one more time.
Yeah. Can you see it better?
Yeah.
You see it better now?
Okay, let's see. I don't know about others, but I see it.
It's cutting off.
It's cutting off, yeah.
It's only showing the bottom half of the screen, Janneke.
You need it. Go open this. Is it better now?
No.
Nope.
Okay.
Oh, that.
What do you see now? The presentation slides or?
You see your PowerPoint screen, but every time you go into presentation mode,
That's like that. That's okay.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It still is not good?
No, there you go.
No, that's perfect. Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, on behalf of myself and my colleague, Dr. Brendan Hemley, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting us to speak. So my name is Amir Shalabi. I work as a professor of transportation engineering and planning at the University of Toronto. And I also serve as the director of the Transit Analytics Lab at the University of Toronto. And I'll be delivering this presentation jointly with Dr. Brendan Hemley, who serves as the senior advisor to the Transit Analytics Lab. So as the title says, we're going to talk today about the potential of using ITS data to support transit planning and operations. Next slide, please, Yannicka. So very quickly today, I'll give an overview about the Transit Analytics Lab at the University of Toronto, a little bit about its history and what it does. And then Brandon will talk about the big transit data evolution and uses of transit data and challenges. And I will end off with giving a few examples of some research projects and initiatives that we've launched recently at the Transit Analytics Lab. Next. So TAL, which stands for Transit Analytics Lab, was set up and created about a year ago, a little bit more than a year. And its main aim really is to serve as a forum to bring both researchers and practitioners, researchers in transit planning and technology, and also practitioners from both the public sector and the private sector, to bring them all together under one roof, in one forum, to discuss really data-driven decision-making and also improvements to transit user experience. So that's the main aim of TAL, but more specifically, next slide. Next slide, Yannicka. So TAL specifically really aims to foster innovation in transit data-driven tools using advanced methods of data science, machine learning, AI, simulation, and statistics. I think Joe in his presentation talked a little bit about that. A second aim of TAL is to serve or to provide training for students across the university in advanced data-driven methods and their applications to public transit decision-making. A third aim of TAL is to expose the professional community through knowledge transfer activities to advanced analytics. So the professional community now is also faced with challenges of using data, and one of the aims, as I said, of TAL is really to help the transit industry with new advanced analytics to process and visualize and use the data that they have at their disposal. Finally, a final aim of TAL is to develop standards and integration methods to accelerate the development of transit analytics. Next slide. Okay, so I think the previous speakers already touched on this, but very quickly, transit agencies now everywhere really are increasingly becoming data rich as they actually equip their vehicles and their infrastructure with ITS systems for automated vehicle monitoring, for passenger counting, for fare collection, and at the same time, there are also new sources of transit data that are emerging, such as Wi-Fi, such as mobile apps and data that are coming out of it, Wi-Fi sensors and Bluetooth sensors. So there's several sensors that are also generating a lot of data. And this is over and above the traditional data sources that transit agencies have at their disposal, such as origin destination travel surveys, ridership or rider satisfaction surveys, passenger count surveys, and so on and so forth. So the point really is that the transit industry, the transit professionals are actually faced with an increasing volume of diversified data at their disposal, and there is actually a need, a critical need of harnessing this data and using this data to inform decision making. Next slide, please. So the process of really harnessing and converting this data, these diverse data sources, such that we derive insights and decisions and informed decision making requires advanced analytics, not only for storage and processing, but also for prediction and optimization. And that's really where TAL, the Transit Analytics Lab, really is pretty much focused on. Next slide. Yeah, so yeah, TAL is focused, as I said, on really data analytics, which could be for data storage, for AI, visualization, machine learning. Those are all different kinds of methods that really can help us, use the data to inform decision making. And I'm going to give you a few examples later on in the presentation of some of the work that we did at TAL with respect to data analytics. Next slide.
So I'll pick up the ball here.
Yeah.
And so my interest is to build a bridge between the research community and the operators, practitioners. I'm involved in both transit agencies, operators, but also with the Transportation Research Board, where I'm chair of the Public Transportation Group. One of the questions is, how can the data be used, and why is it so difficult for transit operators to use this data? And I would like to point out that from a historical point of view, but it's taken a very long time for us, the industry, to become mature enough to really start using the data. In a previous life, I worked for the Canadian Urban Transit Association. The Transit Association organized a conference and supervised a report on use of AVL APC data for planning and management. That was 30 years ago, and it's been a very, very, very slow and gradual process. And it's only the last years that things have changed. Next slide. So what has changed in recent years? Well, I think the data, the systems have become more mature. Accessing the data has become easier. Traditional ITS suppliers are actually providing tools, modules that can use that data. There are new visualization and analytic tools. There are new suppliers targeting the uses of data and these tools. There's a new TRB, Transit Data Task Force, to become a committee. And all of this coincides with some of the points that have been made by previous speakers about societal discussion of big data, IoT, smart cities, and so forth. Next slide. And I think there's been a recognition, a growing recognition, but it's gained some momentum in the last couple of years that by the transit industry that really starting to think about data and analytics. There's a growing recognition that transit ITS data is a valuable resource, creates information that can be used to improve effectiveness and efficiency, and it ties in to a concept of data as a strategic resource in terms of business analytics, business intelligence, decision support systems, but also discussions about open data and big data. Next slide. I prepared a report for the US Department of Transportation a few years ago, where I came up with a typology of the uses of the data. And this is in a very nutshell. I don't have time to go through this, but you can see it really covers the range of applications, from very high level systematic monitoring to details of service operations planning, to strategic analyses for campaigns and major redesigns of systems and networks, tactical analyses, exploratory data mining, and starting now to get into decision support for real-time operations and control. If people are interested in this typology, I'll show you there's a report that I prepared, and you can contact me and I'd be glad to send it to you. Next slide. But given all these uses of data, why has it been so difficult to actually get into getting the industry to use this data? And there are many challenges, and the same report outlines these challenges. There are traditional data management challenges, cybersecurity, data storage, so forth. But the transit industry faces a lot of very specific challenges related to ensuring data quality, all sorts of factors affecting that data quality, and challenges in maintaining and matching and cleaning the data, but even challenges once the data is cleaned up. Next slide. A lot of these are outlined in this report that I just mentioned. It's not very long, it's only 20 pages, but it identifies this range of challenges and why it's been so difficult for the industry to really take advantage of these rich sources of data that can be used as information. again, if anybody's interested, my email is going to be at the end, and you'd be glad to contact me. Next slide. I'll now pass it back to Amer, who's going to talk about some examples of research in various fields related to data analytics in the transit field.
Yeah, so we divide our research into 3 streams: descriptive analytics, predictive analytics, and what we call prescriptive analytics. So I'm going to give you just a quick overview of a few examples from each one of those streams. So in descriptive analytics research, we recently built a dashboard that utilizes open data to really compute access scores and equity scores in 7 US mega regions. So the map to the right, as you can see, really can provide you a very quick snapshot of accessibility to jobs and to hospitals and other opportunities. So it really helps with decision making and specifically really focusing on equity issues. Next. Another work that we did also, we created a software platform and a dashboard that also grabs and processes social media data, specifically Twitter data of transit users who discuss, aspects of the transit service. So we built a software system that really processes those tweets and turn them into, customer satisfaction scores and some analytics as well. Again, each one of those pieces of work, there's I can give you a lot more details if you wish. Again, there's an email address at the end. If you are interested in any one of those examples that I'm going to discuss, please let me know. Next slide. In terms of predictive analytics, this is an area that we've been very active in. So we've built some models, statistical models that use, for example, GPS data on buses and APC data as well to help us predict the expected time of arrival of buses at stops. And this information would then be given through automated transit information systems to users. Also building models to predict bunching incidents. And as you know, bunching is really a major operational issue for transit agencies. So having an ability to predict, the probability of a bunching incident to occur and when and where that is going to happen is something that is very useful for transit agencies. And this is all, again, all data-driven based on available data. Next. Another piece of research, again, now we are in COVID, and a big question really is, what do we anticipate with respect to ridership recovery? So we do a lot of ridership analysis and ridership forecasting models, again, using data from APC and AFC and other sources as well. So a couple of years ago, we developed a very large study of ridership models to predict ridership trends in Canada, across Canada. And there's a big report on this. So this is one example also of the areas of research that we are active in to use the available data for ridership forecasting. Next slide. One of the interesting pieces of work that we also accomplished recently was to develop a software toolkit to help transit agencies with responding to subway disruptions. So in Toronto, when a subway disruption occurs, the transit agencies pulls buses from regular bus routes and dispatches those buses to the location of the subway disruption to serve as shuttle service. So those decisions have to be done in real time, and they have to be done efficiently. So we built a software system to help transit agencies, again, utilizing available data of when the buses are, when and where buses are, and what the ridership on those routes are, so that we can really pull buses from routes that are not really going to affect the ridership adversely. And this is all based on prescriptive models, or some optimization models, and some queuing-based models. Next. We also now are actually working on building some models to predict driver absenteeism, and this has been an issue actually during COVID times, where there is a lot of unscheduled driver absences. And of course, when this happens, obviously this really affects the level of service provided to users. So we're also trying to use data to try to build predictive tools to estimate or predict the level of absenteeism over the next, for example, week, or so that transit agencies can plan accordingly. Next. Sure. Yeah. I'm almost at the end. So transfer time optimization. So we've in transit systems, obviously transfers really is a very predominant step really in any transit journey. So optimizing transfer times by synchronizing the timetables and also real-time connection protection. So we built a lot of analytics to achieve those goals of optimizing transfer times. Next. Demand responsive transit. I think a few previous speakers talked about this. Demand responsive transit or on-demand transit is really becoming a very promising mobility option for transit agencies, but really integrating this with fixed route transit remains a challenge. So we're trying to develop a decision support toolkit to help transit agencies decide where and when really demand responsive transit should be introduced and how it can be integrated with fixed route transit. Next. So this is the last slide. So also we're pretty active in the area of adaptive bus lanes and bus platooning, using connected and automated vehicle technologies. So we're trying to build some machine learning based methods to help come up with new transit service concepts like coordinated TSP, where traffic signals really talk to each other such that they minimize the travel times and also improve reliability for transit vehicles. Also creating bus lanes on an adaptive basis and also creating bus platoons. So we build AI tools to help transit agencies, or at least experiment and examine those concepts in simulation models, and then if successful, can be deployed in the field. Next. I think I'm almost done. Yeah, also another area in which we are active is really management of crowds in multimodal transit hubs. This is becoming, of course, especially important now during COVID times, where we need to manage crowding, and this allow really crowding from exceeding certain levels. So the management of crowds will essentially be based on machine learning based methods that can help transit agencies really achieve certain goals with respect to crowding. Oh. Next slide. So most of our research is really done in partnership with both the private sector and the public sector, and trying to leverage research funding programs, both federal and provincial. So we also collaborate with other universities and even from other countries as well. So we would be very happy to explore any opportunities for collaboration in research with our Malaysian colleagues. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much on behalf of Brendan and myself, and those are our email addresses. If you have any specific questions, we'll be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emma and Brendan. No, it's a very interesting thing that you mentioned in the presentation that sometimes gets overlooked, right? It's the human component of Sometimes it's just as simple things as absenteeism of bus drivers, right? The things that we don't expect because we're just so focused on the technology component of it. Very interesting presentation. Thank you both. And we look forward to hearing more from you during the Q&A session. And for those of you who just joined us, we noticed that there's more and more attendees who are filtering in. So for those of you who just joined us, welcome to this webinar on ITS Build Back Better. So as we're going through our presentations, you can submit your questions for our speakers. Please use the questions tab and you can direct your question to any of our speakers and we will try to get through as many of them as time permits during the Q&A session, right? So our last presentation for today is a very interesting one. We'll be learning about the UK Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office's Global Future Cities Program, or the GFCP in Malaysia. The GFCP is enabling the development of a smart integrated mobility management system in Iskandar, Malaysia, which is in the southern part of Malaysia, as well as a green transport master plan for the state of Malacca. Our speaker is Michael Curtois. He's the country manager at Multimodal, Malaysia. He has more than 35 years of working experience in railway and transport projects, especially in urban settings. His expertise lies in managing, designing, and advising on rail projects, big data, and creating informed decisions. Mike's presentation is titled Global Future Cities Program. Mike, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mohan. Selamat pagi semua. Good evening, good morning, and bonsoir. Today it's looking at the Global Future Cities Program and the work we're doing in Malaysia. Let's go to the next one then, please. Oh, we're not presenting yet, Yannicka.
Should be right there, slide number 2. Let's try it again.
Yeah, we're still seeing. No, we're still seeing the cover sheet slide. So while we sort that out, a little bit about the program. As Mohan says, it's a UK Foreign Commonwealth Development Office funded program in Malaysia, and actually through the region. We're still just seeing the first slide. It's part of a wider program so that reaches through countries such as Turkey, Nigeria, and into Brazil. It's within Southeast Asia. It reaches there are 13 projects across 9 cities, 6 countries, and it's taking place over 3 years. Do you want to try presenting? We're not moving at all. No, we're just getting the PowerPoint template.
Okay.
Maybe what we can do, Michael, if you have the presentation with you, we can give you presenter rights to see if you can control your own slides with them.
Yep.
All right.
Okay.
So I will.
I'm making presenter.
So you should be able to share your screen now, Michael.
Where's the share screen button? Hold on. Show screen, right. If I only knew which monitor it was.
It's okay, these things happen sometimes. There we go.
Good,
Perfect.
Okay. So just a little bit of an introduction to the program. So it's a UK funded program. The themes are urban planning, transportation and resilience. And it's a 3-year program to increase local prosperity. Sorry, I'm having to bend my neck. And create multiple mutually beneficial two-way trade opportunities as well. So the program is about urban planning, transportation and resilience, and really picks up on the themes that looking at those transport analytics and the basic analytics that were raised earlier. So as I said, it's centered across these multiple countries. in Southeast Asia, as well as part of a wider global program. So if we look at the Building Back Better in Iskandar, Malaysia, in Iskandar, Malaysia is at the bottom of the tip of the peninsula Malaysia. It's the border with, or marks the border with Singapore. So it's heavily used in normal conditions. As we say, we've got an implementation strategy for a smart integrated mobility management system, hence the major connection with collecting data and collating data, which is really good to hear the TAL experience just previously. And it's creating, and then the second step is creating the enabling conditions for data utilization management for evidence-based urban and transport planning. So you've got to have good data. It's all about setting out that as a basis, being able then to apply that to controlling traffic, increasing public transport, and improving urban planning. Malaysia, and certainly outside the Klang Valley, which is the Kuala Lumpur and Selangor area, suffers from low use of public transport. The car still very much predominates, and these are sorts of areas that they are required to be addressed as part of the national plans. SIMS also connects with a thing called the IMUO, which is the Urban Observatory in Iskandar, Malaysia, and that therefore will enable use across sectors. So this is really looking at cross-cutting initiatives to enable data to be used for better planning, especially into transport and interconnectivity with urban planning. So if we look at some of the data categories that SIMS is starting to address, and we're running pilot to do this, so we've got things like transportation. I think one of the things really to note is the challenges that this brings, because Malaysia as a federal, state and local district run sort of form of government means that there are complex interrelationships. Many ministries have an interest in public transport. I was shown one slide that got up to, I think, 25 interested parties at federal level before we even got down to state. So we've got this very, very much dispersed nature, and it's actually creating those data governance challenges and bringing all this together. Clearly, ITS data forms a crucial part of this, as does the basic information that comes out of that, what needs to be stored to enable these things. There's a significant aspect of the program looking at the social development. So we have a GESI element, which is gender equality and social inclusion, because especially as we seek to build back better, we've got to be making better plans. We've got to be spending our money wisely. So, and that then cascades down into all these other ones. So the economic aspects of what's going on, the spatial planning, are we actually planning stuff that is opening up and creates that accessibility to public transport? Quality of life, natural environment, obviously, these are the key interfaces, and some of the other aspects that can then be captured. So if we look at the core concept of SIMS, really we're putting at the heart of it, the key applications, those ITS applications, the data, because data will fuel all these systems. The transport and urban planning application, and then moving out to the areas of transport modelling, so you can look at the various scenarios that arise as you make different interventions on the network. For that, we need these data feeds, and the key data and the core data will be stored in a core. But I think as was reflected at the beginning, we know that many of these will grow very rapidly, and the data sources can be huge. So we need to work within what's reasonable and what suggested, but at the first instance, it's actually getting people to share data and think in those sort of terms, because building that up as a consolidated block in the middle is so crucial. So, here we've listed out some of the key data connections that we've already made. So it's the MBs are the local authorities. We've got meteorological data. We've got the federal traffic. We've got various ITS equipment potentially linking in and through into the public transport authority, which is PAJ, and back out into some of these other areas, including things like GTFS, which is sorely lacking. Public tracking of transit is still a problem really outside the Kuala Lumpur area. it brings into play what sort of interventions can come up and therefore what ITS is needed. So it's creating decision points on some of the key highways so that people can determine which crossings they wish to use. And these are sorts of pilots that then need to be fleshed out. So these are the sort of ITS things that are going into the ITS master plan that says you want to be doing this in the future. This will help you, whether we're looking at congestion, whether we're looking at diversion onto the correct crossing. So the area in the bottom is very much it's into Singapore. So we've got the first and second crossings identified and potential journey time detectors. Similarly, we could have congestion charging or whatever, because we know we're going to have to raise money and revenue to be able to supply all this. And you know, our ITS also brings in that potential revenue capture through some form of charging, whether it's congestion, road charging, whatever. And you can see the connection being made after the decision point. And then the other choice, and yet another choice on routing. There are some that we don't want them to take, and that may well represent that discouragement level. So looking at long-term capacity, and it was good to see what Tara's doing. So, you know, we need this GIS capability, we need ITS development. And that then brings into play, you know, that awareness of all the communities so that we're leaving no one behind, treating something as an innovative solution, and that brings into play urban and transport planning. So if we then look at Malacca, where the interventions are very much more based on the concept of actually doing something and delivering something, because the creation of the Green Transport Master Plan, and in fact we've got a heritage area improvement and a green bus network, are much more focused on actually what does Malacca need now to help it overcome some of its challenges. Malacca, as you may tell by the photo, it's a historic city. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It represents some of the first, or it was a key trading settlement before the colonial powers arrived, and then it was fought over and taken over by the Portuguese, the Dutch, and finally the British. So it has a long history, and it was a very, very important hub, and it still has this heritage aspect that means it attracts something like 17 million foreign visitors a year under normal circumstances. So within Malacca, we've got two interventions, as I say. We've got the Green Bus Network and Green Transport Master Plan, and a heritage area integrated mobility plan. One of the challenges, obviously, with a historic city, is you've got a relatively small city centre. So we've got to create those environments where we improve public and non-motorised transport provision. We need to create behavioural change among residents and tourists, which will be, you know, there is often quite a bit of thought, and as I hinted earlier, you know, Malaysia is very, very, very car focused and car and motorbike focused in truth. So we need to change those habits so that the residents don't think that the buses are provided for tourists, they're there for everyone. We know also that a disproportionate, inevitably it's very important that the B40, which is the bottom 40 percentile group of the Malaysian population, so the lowest income earners, you know, public transport is important. And just seeing that little bit of data analytics earlier, which is very much the way our program is focused, is it's doing the analytics and creating that sort of data that enables the B40 to, and in fact everybody else, because if you're including that wider GESI group, effectively you're including the whole of society, to get access to healthcare, to get access to education, to get access to economic improvement and sort of things such as employment, jobs, etc. And obviously to, you know, to markets. People still shop on a daily basis. There's an awful lot of people who still exist on a daily wage in Malaysia. Literally what they earn that day is what they're going to spend to live on. And you can imagine the challenges of the MCO. I live in the middle of Kuala Lumpur. It's been quite dispiriting at times to see what goes on, but this is all part of what we've got to build back better to support. So We've been looking at the green bus network and proposing public transport services. So this is very much using whatever data sets we can pull together. We have the Department of Statistics census data from which we can use to understand where people are. It obviously needs to break down and be more granular. So those are the sorts of future data challenges that we have, and we make those recommendations when we use them. Similarly, we've got the planning areas, and we need to incorporate all the new planning. And the map shows some of those sorts of areas, and the shading represents different land use and potential future developments. But we're trying to make sure that we make those connections between future developments now and what goes in, and what's planned, and then what's actually created. We then need to create those better focus on bus networks. So, looking at that bus network, and the reality is, with Malacca has a relatively low density. It's one of the smallest of the Malaysian states, and it's never really going to reach anything which is up for, major rail or metro type transit. But it's probably reaching the levels of BRT in certain corridors. But we need to make sure that that access is provided to those corridors. We've got to plan for that and think how we build around transport infrastructure to create the modal changes that are required. There's some steep requirements, and those will inform the SDGs, the use of fuel, all these sorts of areas. So we're using all the sort of data sets and understanding from existing ridership data, albeit very, very low, where bus routes and need to go, how they're served against population and against existing ridership. We know that the minute you start moving outside the city, not surprisingly, ridership drops off very quickly. But also then looking at having modelled and used the existing data, it's identifying areas of bus where maybe bus priority is needed, and fundamentals provision of basic bus information. Presently, really, there is none, and then moving towards real-time bus data. But it's got to be remembered that actually the poorer members of the community don't all have smartphones, so we need to work out how best to convey that. We're also looking at the heritage area. So one of the keys is to stop traffic really getting to the heritage area. So this is looking at the pedestrianisation of key streets and monitoring of future impacts and future improvements that create pedestrianisation, create this much, much better environment. One of the wider challenges that brings is then that we are trying to intercept people before they even get to the heritage area, so we remove congestion in that way, and that will bring into play ITS equipment to potentially create yet again congestion charging or something along those lines, and the need potentially to reduce the amount of parking. Obviously, pedestrianisation will be one means of doing that.
Got 1 minute left?
No, that's the end. Thanks, Jan.
Right on time, Mike. Right. Thank you very much for that presentation, and thank you for navigating your own slides. Michael, was very, very instructive for all of us to see case studies of actual ITS implementations in townships in Malaysia. So now that we've heard from all our speakers, we would like to hear from you. Right, so if you have questions for our speakers, once again, please pop it into the questions box, and we are down to the last 20 minutes of our time with you today. So we will try to get to as many questions as we can. So I will invite all our speakers to come on screen, to turn on your cameras for this Q&A session. And we have a few questions with us that we'll go through. And how I'd like to structure this Q&A session is I will address these questions to perhaps one or two speakers, but any speaker that wants to that has input to share, please just chip in once the target speakers have answered their questions. Right. So the first question we have is I'll direct it to both Joe and Fairoz, since perhaps Joe will provide a Canadian perspective and Fairoz can provide a Malaysian perspective on this. So This is with regards to economic recovery, as countries, both Canada and Malaysia, recover from the negative economic impacts due to lockdown or movement control orders. Many governments will invariably be preparing economic stimulus packages to bolster the infrastructure works. What are the quick wins that are available to Canada and Malaysia to build back better for funding to ITS projects? So where can the stimulus packages be best directed when it comes to ITS projects? So perhaps, Joe, would you like to go first?
Well, this is a tough question. Now, ITS is only a small sector of the total economy, so obviously it's not. We don't expect ITS to be able to stimulate the entire economy, but ITS can do a lot of things on transportation, and really, to me, transportation is the key aspect of a smart city and a key aspect of any economy. So if people can be mobile safely and quickly and economically, that'll be good for the nation. So I think one big early winner, if you like, is really using the data, because the data is there, and we have to make use of analytics and AI to bring the power of the data to ITS. Why AI and why data analytics? Because it's not very infrastructure oriented, if you know what I mean. Like it takes a lot of software, it takes a lot of thinking, but it doesn't take a lot of infrastructure improvement. So I think it's quick to implement that way. So I think I'll end here.
All right. And what about Fairuz, perhaps the representative from ITS Malaysia?
Sorry, the connection just now is lost. Could you repeat the question, please?
Sure. So basically, the question is with regards to stimulus packages, so economic stimulus packages that goes to infrastructure projects. What would be the quick wins or the low-hanging fruits that this economic stimulus can be directed to ITS projects? Which area of ITX can benefit from these stimulus packages?
Oh my God, this is a hard question for me to answer. As of now, although we have already established the ITS Blueprint, but in highlight of ITS implementation in Malaysia is still ongoing. It's not yet matured. But talking about the stimulus package, actually the Ministry of Work is focusing on small scale projects that can implemented within the shortest period of time that have biggest impact to the public. So like I said earlier, ITS is not yet a component to be used as a similar package currently. That's the only thing that I can say right now. Okay, that's the only thing.
Sure. Thank you very much. And one of the things that you mentioned that is actually a key point is the policy component, because we see this both in Canada as well as in Malaysia, where Malaysia has the ITS Blueprint. In Joe's presentation also, you mentioned about the national ITS strategic plans. So when it comes to a roadmap, or when it comes to policies, there are already these roadmaps in place. So perhaps this next question I will address to Amir and Brandon, and perhaps even Joe, if you think there's an area for input. So basically, the question is, we see that there's developments of roadmaps and policies, but that may not have taken into consideration the rapid pace of technological development that we see in recent years. So how can governments or the ITS bodies consolidate both the plans to accommodate the rapid pace of technological developments? So perhaps I'll turn it over to Amir and Brandon first, if either of you would like to go first.
I can go. One of the things I think there hasn't been enough action from government agencies is investing in demonstrations that then prove a technology, prove a concept that can be disseminated. The public sector is by its very nature risk averse. It has to be accountable, has to be transparent, and does not take risks. And so it's very hard to convince them to invest in technology and the data that comes from technology, because they have much to lose and they haven't been shown that they have much to gain. So I've always felt that there's a more important role for governments to invest in technology, in demonstration projects, pilot projects, but especially to disseminate the results afterwards. That's also another major failure where, you get a one-page bulletin news release and you learn nothing from it. So.
Thank you, Brendan. Joe, would you like to provide input as well?
Yeah, I have a couple of comments. Well, technology moves very fast, so I think we all need strategic planning, but more on the strategic objective rather than the plan, because with the strategic objective, hopefully we can be very fast in changing to adapt to new technology. So the old way of doing a 5-year plan is gone. I think we have to do a 5-year strategic objective with action plan to fit every year, and of course we have to include those 2 words, migration plan. In other words, any infrastructure, anything we plan, kind of a migration plan, so that if 5G goes to 6G, what happens, because you don't want to be stuck with something that is only works on 5G. So I think enough said here. So.
Thank you, Joe. Mike, did you want to provide input as well?
Yeah, interesting area, and picking up on the pilot piece, we've been running as part of the program workshops and sharing our learnings as we go along the pilot. We kind of reached the completion and are writing the report on it, but that's been shared every month for the last 6 months with all the local stakeholders in Iskandar, Malaysia, and we've even dragged, that's probably not, invited others, sharing the knowledge. So we've shared that with other cities. We've brought in our colleagues in Malacca, we've brought in our friends from DBKL and shared it more widely. So, it's important that we do get this feedback. I think, one of the, and just picking up, just some of my experiences the whole way through my career is, the things that go right and the things that go wrong. And it's only when you've repeated it and someone turns around and says, yeah, we had the same problem, that you clutch your head and smile and go, yeah, okay. I wish you'd told that, I wish I'd known that before. So it's like, sharing is good, and it's whether it's data, whether it's experience, and just picking up on Joe's comment, we're very much developing an ITS master plan. But all these things need funding, and that's going to be the base challenge. At present, it's very much standalone, single entity or a simple green wave, but it's how do you then convert that into serious systematic data of traffic and public transport and all these other areas. Thanks.
Thanks, Mike. And I think it's a useful follow-up question on what you mentioned as the sharing of data. So I'd like to follow this up with yourself as well as both Amir and Brendan. So when it comes to these ITS projects, and when we specifically speak about data, gathering the data required to make these projects work, sometimes the people or the stakeholders collecting that data, they're from various, some are in the public sector, some are in the private sector, and I think one of the major issues that was discussed at the last ITS World Congress was integrating all these data, bringing all these stakeholders together. So when it comes to integrating these data platforms, working with different stakeholders, how can these different stakeholders be incentivized, especially the private sector? How can they be incentivized to contribute their data to an open data hub or to sharing the data that they have? Mike, do you have any comments?
Sadly, I'll have a comment on everything. But it is a massive issue. You know, there are the commercial sensitivities involved. You know, we acknowledge that we're dealing often with commercial organisations on quite rigid contractual terms, or competitive. Faro's made reference earlier to APAD, the Land Transportation Agency, and part of that will need to be, you know, that may cover certain aspects of public transport, and the reality in Malaysia is, you know, outside KL, it's pretty much only bus, with the exception perhaps of Iskandar Malaysia, where they're working on the BRT, and Kuching working on the ART. All these data sets need to be incorporated. It's going to be a challenge, but as part of these programs, we need to know ridership. We need to know how people are moving around. Understanding that enables us to create much better conditions for everybody to live in, so the urban planning and broader. That said, we even trying to incorporate the data that does sit under the purview of the wider region. You know, we've got 5 local authorities. We've got JKR, which is kind of the local aspect of the Ministry of Works and its highways. We've got connections into toll roads, another commercially sensitive area, and so it goes on. And that actually, once you start looking at it in the wider aspect, yes, you've got a lot of interfaces, and we've got to get people, certainly in Malaysia, out of this habit of, I'm sharing data, so here it is. No. You know, data is not static. It's an ongoing collection, and we've got to rethink what we do. And that's, you know, we've got to change the way we think about data, full stop, and make my challenge in writing the sort of data governance and the governance structure is sort of saying, well, you need to be thinking, why am I not sharing data, rather than why am I sharing data? We've got to reverse the way we think and the whole way we look at it, and say, well, as long as it doesn't cover PDPA, you know, personal data, is there anything, you know, or anything particularly commercially sensitive we need to be sharing as default, because otherwise the systems just will grind to a halt. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. Brendan, please go ahead.
I totally agree. One of the challenges has been that because the public authorities haven't realized the value of the data, they haven't paid sufficiently attention to making sure that they own the data when they procure the systems. I think this is same in traffic, but in the transit field, a lot of the systems were purchased for other reasons, and fare collection system is purchased to manage revenue, control, you know, to manage fraud. It wasn't to collect data that gives you origin destination patterns of passengers. And similarly, the ITS systems were purchased because they were for incident management and security, not to, you know, collect data that helps you understand on-time performance. And so a lot of them were procured without specifying that the data belonged to the authority. They hadn't dealt with the data governance because they didn't realize it was important. And until they do, you have a real problem, because all the private sector firms are very, very clever, and they have in their boilerplate that if you haven't specified when you procure the system that it belongs to you, it belongs to them. And that's just, we have to make sure that people realize that the data is really strategically important, and you have to do it when you procure the system, because after the fact, you're just paying license fees and so forth and so on.
Thank you, Brendan. We have a question from Muhammad Bashir Abdi for Mike. So basically, Muhammad Bashir asked Mike, how does the SIMMS implementation roadmap affect GIS for long-term capacity?
Affect GIS for long-term capacity?
That's right.
Yeah. Effectively, I mean, what we're trying to do is get everybody sharing. So affect ITS or GIS capacity. Sorry, the question again. Just make sure I answer the right question. I can do either.
So basically, the question is how does implementation of SIMMS affect GIS for long-term capacity?
Okay, so I think we've got to accept our relationship and with GIS. I come from a consultant's background, and I can remember 30 years ago my first foray into GIS, and that was after I've been working for quite a long time. So excuse, it is grey, honest. But what it does reflect is our kind of relationship with data and the ability to assemble data. So when working, I was sent a questionnaire about 25, 30 years ago saying, how will it affect consultancy? And kind of go, well, we don't have access to data sets. That really sits with the data owners and really picks up on what Brendan was saying. The crucial sort of elements are that I think it's going to become predominant, that it's how we, how the user accesses this data. It also opens up the use of sort of smart GIS, which is where you're going to do your data analytics and changing onto those sort of platforms, which I'm sure TAL know far better than I do. But it's kind of those steps to creating apps, to creating things that will enable that, visualization and visibility. To me, sorry, I've got a geography degree. I'm a surveyor. I've worked my whole life in transit projects. But to me, spatial is just fundamental. If we don't understand our spatial relationships, and to quote the first thing I learned when I went to university, well, the first course I sat on, it was who gets what where, and it was all about the geography of healthcare. And if we don't understand the basic provision of services to society, that's what underpins the GIS. It's what underpins our transport networks. It's what underpins our urban planning and our whole mobility, way we think about mobility. So to me, GIS is it will grow, but it will morph, and actually more things will come into as kind of a GIS platform. It won't necessarily be the same one, but we will see that evolve as well, as kind of Joe reflects. We've got so many changes in technology. That's another one which I suspect will change and evolve.
Thank you, Mike, for taking that
Can
Mohan.
Yep.
Mohan, in the chat room, we just wanted to acknowledge the presence of Mohammed Nizam Mustafa, Deputy Undersecretary of Highway Planning Department, who actually is representing presenter number 2, Farouz bin Mohammed. I just want to acknowledge that. And the other thing is, I think that Amir also wanted to say a few words. So if we can maybe let Amir speak for a sec. Amir?
No, I just wanted to comment on the previous question with respect to data. So when it comes to innovation, in the field of data analytics, surprisingly, getting data and acquiring data by an academic institution is actually quite challenging and quite varied. Some agencies are willing to provide data, others are not. And even the same agency, it really depends on who you're talking to. And also another issue is, when transit agencies do not necessarily really have a strategy or a vision with respect of the usage of data. And of course, they are always short-staffed, and it's not really a priority for them to help you, even give you the data and answer questions about the data. So, which really, all of this really hinders innovation in building new data analytics and so on, which it's quite unfortunate. I mean, with TAL, we'll try to overcome some of those challenges, but they still are really quite, in some cases, they are quite severe, unfortunately. So I think there is a need, I mean, just to summarize my point, I think there is a need really of, for like sort of a policy of, data sharing, and especially with academic institutions to really advance the data analytics and technology development.
Thank you, Amir. Mike, you had a point as well?
Yeah, I just to add, and thank you for raising it, because it's actually we've been talking to the local universities in Malaysia, so UTM down in Iskandar Malaysia, and UTM in Malacca, about exactly this. And certainly for SIMS, one of the recommendations we're putting in is saying as part of your data sharing policy, there is a sort of open data portal, but that's all very static data, and it's not going to be the real big data that people want to use and drill into. Just sharing statistical analytics is fascinating for. I mean, it's the sort of thing I read at weekends, but what else do you do in lockdown at weekends? But for harnessing the groups that we have in front of us and bringing innovation and development to some of these things, we've got to be thinking about how we share data, actually bringing in academia straight in as a potential user of the portal, which is what it's okay, I wrote it. So, but it's what we're recommending, because that way you're driving things together. We're also sharing these solutions with the next generation. So whilst you may be doing your research, you can, that can then be cascaded through into summaries and analytics for students, so they actually get visibility of what's going on, because this is going to be their career. I mean, the world I've grown up in, and seen change, it's going to be their turn, and we've got to make sure that we pass that baton on as part of the challenge.
Perfect, Mike. And I noticed we are over time here, so perhaps as we'll wrap up the Q&A session, and before we conclude today, I will invite each of our speakers today, just in 30 seconds, please provide us some quick key messages. What are the key takeaway points that you'd like to leave our audience with? So we'll start with you, Mike.
I'll be very quick. Don't just think simple open data, think data sharing. The better data we get, the more informed decisions we can make, and actually they're the ones that bring the best value. And money is so crucial because we've got to invest it correctly to build back better. Thanks.
Amir?
I would really like to share the message of collaboration. It's actually quite essential for all parties really to come together to solve the transportation problem. We are faced with a lot of problems. Each one of us can really provide part of the solution, not all the solution. But I think collaboration is quite key.
Thank you, Amir. Brendan, any key takeaway points?
I think the COVID pandemic has shown the importance of technology and the data it produces. Those systems that had invested in both the tools and especially the internal expertise with the data scientists, business analysts, so forth, were able to actually use that to show real-time crowding on transit vehicles. And that is going to be critical for getting people to have the confidence to get back on public transportation.
Cik Nizam, any closing words on behalf of ITS Malaysia?
All right. Actually, I'm on behalf of Ministry of Work. We're part of from ITS Malaysia. Okay. Among others, we have already discussed a lot about data collaboration and so on. I think as of now, although Malaysia has already established our Malaysian ITS Blueprint, that being carried forward until 2023. So as of the pandemic issues, this ITS initiative still ongoing by the multiple agencies that are being carried out. Although we need, they have more potential for Malaysia to have cooperation with industry in terms of transportation and so on, so we can go on and finalizing our initiative at the end of 2023. That's the only things that I can say right now. Okay, Mohan, thank you.
And finally, Joe.
Yeah, thank you, Mohan. Well, I just want to say that the pandemic has caused a lot of problem to transportation experts and operators alike, but there are technologies which we can utilize to help us. But my plea is that, sort of further along what Amir was saying, collaboration, but do not reinvent the wheel, because as international partners collaborate, why don't we make use of each other, build on each other's results so that we can improve and recover much faster. So with that, I certainly offer what's available from Canada to Malaysian friends and take it from there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joe. And with that, I'd like to thank all our speakers, Joe, Nizam, Cik Fairuz, who had to leave, unfortunately, both Brandon and Amir, as well as Mike, for their time with us this Wednesday morning. And for those in Canada, it's Tuesday late evening. So thank you very much for your time. And thank you to all our attendees today for being with us. We hope you have benefited from this session, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow, where we will take a closer look at the safety aspect of ITS. So if you have not registered for the session tomorrow, please do so, because the link that you use to log into today's webinar will not work for tomorrow's webinar. So I'm going to ask Yannicka, if it's possible, would you be able to put in the registration link into the chat box so that our guests who have not registered for tomorrow can do so. This recording of this webinar will be made available on the ITS website. So for those of you who joined us halfway, or for your colleagues who were not able to make it today, fret not. They will be able to watch this recording on the ITS website. Yannicka, anything to add before we wrap up?
I will send everybody an email with the registration link. My internet is slow, but I also wanted to thank a big applause. If everybody can big applause for Mohan. Thank you for being the moderator of tonight's event. And I also want to thank everybody behind the scenes who have helped us support making this webinar tonight a success. You know who you are. You are part of the staff. Thank you very much. Obviously, Canadian High Commission as well for their support, people behind the scene of ITS Malaysia. And I will send everybody an email where they can register for the webinar that will take place in 24 hours. Mohan, thank you so very much. Joe, thank you for bringing everybody together. Have a good night and a good rest of your day. We'll see you tomorrow.
Right. Thank you.
Guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Okay, bye-bye, people.